Good morning, Fairfield Christian. Hope you guys had a fantastic Labor Day weekend, a nice long weekend to rest and relax. But that also means we have a short week this week, only 4 days of school this week. Now that's good, unless you're talking about how much time you need for scripture memorization, because that's one less day to memorize your scripture verse, unless you started already. So if you haven't, you might want to get on that pretty quickly. Once again, we're looking at people of the Bible. The first two people we looked at were Luke and Melchizedek. And this week we're looking at Miriam, the first woman on our list. And Miriam plays an important role in the Old Testament. There's lots of things we know about Miriam, even though she's only mentioned 7 times in the Bible. That's already more than twice as many times as Luke and Melchizedek. But we do know quite a bit about her, mostly because of who she's related to, because she is the sister of both Moses and Aaron. Now, the first time we see Miriam in the Bible, she is a young woman and Moses is a baby. Now, the Israelites were slaves to the Egyptians during this time. And the Israelites' population was increasing very quickly, and the Egyptians were worried about it. They were worried about the Israelites becoming too numerous and then eventually overthrowing the Egyptians. So the Egyptians made a new law, and they told the Israelites, any baby boys have to be thrown into the Nile River. It's not very nice. So Moses' mom had him, and she raised him for 3 months in private. She kept him secret. Nobody knew that he was born. But after 3 months, she couldn't keep him hidden anymore. So she put him in a reed basket and put that in the Nile River, which means she didn't technically break the law. She did put the child in the Nile River. She just also added a basket into the equation as well. But Moses was floating in the river, and Miriam was nearby watching the basket in the river, kind of keeping watch over her younger brother, Moses. Then we know that Pharaoh's daughter was also at the river, and she happened to come across the basket with Moses inside, and she decided to adopt Moses as her own son. Now, historically, this is actually very accurate. If this is the Pharaoh's daughter that we think it is, she actually couldn't have children of her own. So it actually is very, very plausible that she would want to adopt the baby that she finds. Now, she could not nurse Moses, which means she would need a nursemaid. Fortunately, Miriam knew of one, knew of a woman that could be a nursemaid, but she didn't tell Pharaoh or Pharaoh's daughter that that would actually be Moses' actual mother. But Miriam did show a lot of bravery. Miriam spoke up when she could have just stayed silent and hidden. Instead, she showed bravery in approaching Pharaoh's daughter. That was dangerous. If Pharaoh's daughter didn't like what she had to say, she could have had her killed. But Miriam was more interested in protecting her brother Moses, so she spoke up to Pharaoh's daughter. Remember, Miriam's just a slave girl. She's not an important person in terms of their society. But Miriam felt it was more important to be brave, step up, and speak out for her brother. And because of that, because of her bravery, Moses' own mother got to raise him, because Miriam said, I know of a nursemaid. And she obviously chose her own mother and Moses' mother to be the nursemaid to Moses. Great things came of her bravery. Now, the next time we see Miriam is 80 years later. That's a long time. In the meantime, lots of things take place. Moses grows up. He actually kills an Egyptian guard. He's afraid because he does that. So he flees into the wilderness, goes to the land of Midian, stays there for a while, becomes a shepherd. God appears to him in a burning bush. Moses goes back to Egypt. The 10 plagues take place. He leads the people out of Egypt, and they're escaping the Egyptians. And then we get to the part of the story where they get to the Red Sea, and Moses has to part the Red Sea so that the Israelites can escape from the Egyptians, because the Egyptians are coming up on them fast. And Moses parts the Red Sea, the Israelites cross through, the Egyptian army then tries to cross, but the waves and everything crash down, and the waves kill all the Egyptian soldiers and their chariots and horses and all that kind of stuff. And the Israelites celebrate. During this celebration, Miriam writes a song. And she sings this song, and that's where we are in our scripture verse this week. We're in Exodus chapter 15, and this is part of the song of Miriam. So, in chapter 15, verse 20, this is what it says. Then Miriam, the prophet, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine and led all the women as they played their tambourines and danced. And Miriam sang this song. Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. He has hurled both horse and rider into the sea. So from our scripture verse, there are several things we find out about Miriam. First of all, she's a prophet. That means God speaks to her on behalf of the people of Israel. God speaks to her. That's important because God doesn't do that to everybody, especially in the Old Testament. But Miriam, in some way, has to be right with God if God is going to allow her to be a prophet among the people. 2, we find out that this is Aaron's sister. And 3, we find out that she is a singer and songwriter. This is also significant. Singing and writing songs, it means that she was a worshiper. She loved to worship God. That means she found God more important than other things. And she's worshiping God, thanking Him for saving the people of Israel. Now, worship is more than just being thankful. Worship means you put God in a special position no matter the circumstances. You always hold Him in a place of worship. And in our lives should reflect that place of worship, showing value or worth to God. Worthship. That's where the word worship comes from. We show worth or value to God. And Miriam is a worshiper. She's worshiping God through her song. And she again shows bravery. It takes some bravery to write a song and sing it in front of other people, let alone lead them all in worship. Yet Miriam shows us that as well. Miriam has lots of qualities as we go through her life that we both want to follow, and she has some qualities that we want to learn from as well, that maybe she didn't handle certain situations quite so well, and we're probably going to talk about those a little bit in chapel on Friday. But continue to look at this verse. You guys continue to talk about it in class with your teachers, maybe during devotions and things like that. We'll certainly talk about it again on Friday as well. Miriam, she's an important person in the Old Testament. She's one of the leaders of the Israelites, as Micah 6:4 tells us. Her, Aaron, and Moses are the 3 leaders of the Israelites, and so that makes her a pretty important person in the Old Testament, and definitely someone we want to get to know a little bit better. All right, hope to see you guys around campus. God bless.